What's going on, guys? Your boy Jermane'S. Another day today. Today is actually Wednesday, July 1st, 2026. Day of our Lord. Another day to be alive and be thankful and everything. So today we have some stories for you right from the United States backyard. We ain't gonna travel all the way to Iran today, but we have some stories right from the United States backyard. And it's something that we need to pay attention to. Um, Cuba and U.S. talks are at a standstill, and United States just deploy 900 troops on the ground in Venezuela to help with earthquake relief, so on and so forth. So please remember, guys, like for the YouTube algorithm, comment, and share this link. And I'm here from the mobile studio, the car, but we're dropping some jewels today. So pretty much talks between Cuba and the United States come to a standstill despite Cuba recently implement some free market measures. And you know I guess the United States didn't like that. Well, basically we have to circle back why United States is blocking Cuba and all these sanctions in Cuba is because, one, the United States doesn't want um, Russia and China in its backyard, because Cuba is around 90 miles off the coast of Florida, and we don't want communism and that type of government right in our backyard, because Cuba have ties to Russia and they have ties to China in a way that influence their government. So that's the reason why United States is applying economical sanctions to Cuba. So Cuba is folding because the government of Cuba implements some free market reforms. Meaning free market reforms meaning they implement some reforms where they're taking out their hands out of the means of production of goods and services within the country. And they, because everything in Cuba as it relates to the economy is run by the government, and it's not a free market there. It's a controlled market. The government control prices of goods and services to a certain extent, but you know that's one of the conditions America would like to change. So Cuba, let me read you guys something. Um, Cuba approved 176 economic measures, representing the biggest economic shift since the revolution, including more space for private businesses, free hiring of personnel, and authorization of private banks and investment by Cubans abroad. And yet the U.S. responded with a new package of sanctions against Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel and other officials. So despite them trying to fold and implement free market measures and implement um, and taking government hands out of the ways and means of production, um, America still is not satisfied with what's going on, and they implement a few more sanctions. So this is the thing we got to understand, is that Cuba and the United States have a long relationship, of sour relation, and it's all started when from the Cuban revolution, and from that day until now, we have been sanctioning the hell out of Cuba, and now the latest rounds of sanction, plus there's an oil embargo. So Cuba is actually running out of oil as we speak right now. And that's one thing the foreign minister announced, that on July 7, a debate on the UN's, they're going to have a debate at the United Nations specifically over the U.S. oil embargo. So I'm not sure if you guys noticed, over the course of months and weeks, Cubans have been demonstrating because the country is out of oil. They have brownouts, they have blackouts, they have periods. They have periods of time where there's just no power. because the Cuban power grid is run on oil and gas and petroleum products, and they used to get most of that from Venezuela, and Venezuela now is pretty much, you can say Venezuela is in U.S. control, because the government there in the Venezuela is pro United States, as you know we can assess that, and Cuba get all their oil and gas from Venezuela, and now it's cut off. You know, so the blockage of oil has caused further paralyzation to Cuba's economy. Um, you know, it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy, because you know why? We have now come to the realization that gas and oil is the lifeline of any major economy. Even though we're trying to go green, go solar, go renewable energy, but deep down, gas and oil is the backbone. And Cuba doesn't have oil, doesn't have gas, and their economy is being paralyzed due to this fact. And it's a sad situation. But ultimately, though, what America wants is that Cuba um, start allowing people to come down there. When I say people, they should, implement a free market and just lose control over the economy. That's what America wants, over the government system, over the economy, and they want democracy down there. So they don't want any totalitarian government, any communist government. They want democracy down there. So that's what America is fighting for in their backyard, is democracy, because Cuba is 90 miles away from Florida. And when democracy is in your backyard, then your foreign adversary, like the Russians and the Chinese, they don't have such ways of means of government. They're not going to be attracted to come inside of Cuba. And you know basically democracy works with democracy, and China and Russia is not democracy, so they're not going to work with Cuba if Cuba become a democratic state in a way. So that's what America is trying to control. um, uh, you know over there in Cuba. But the pressure is on Cuba because, let me read you something again. The oil blockage has further paralyzed Cuba's economy, leading to prolonged blackouts. Um, Fuel rationing, internet outage, and the suspension of public transportation and flight cancellation. Basic services such as garbage collection and water delivery have been suspended, and work days have been reduced. So, you see the extent to the paralysis of the Cuban economy. So basically, all the functions and all the stuff that make the economy, all the things that make the economy function, are reduced or either suspended. Work week are shortened. Basic garbage services suspended at times. Internet blackouts. It's a whole lot, and it piggies back into my recent argument, is that oil and gas run the world economy, and any nation that doesn't have adequate oil and gas, they are in a bad state, and such is Cuba. You know, the Cubans are hurting. I understand that, and talks have suspended as we are now. I'm hearing, and what's next? That's the questions. What's next? That's a big question. What's next? Is the government is going to totally decapitated and by the United States? When I said decapitated, I mean that, is the government going to just fold by the pressure of the United States and just basically turn Cuba into a free market economy and a democratic state? We don't know that, but I think that's the ultimate goal of Trump, and that's the ultimate goal of this administration, to deter communism from this region, this hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, our backyard, the United States backyard. So that's what it is. Um, but the Cubans are holding on, and they try to slowly move forward in the direction the United States want them to move forward, to move in. So let me read you something else. Rodriguez noted that while the conduct of the U.S. government officials was generally respectful during earlier talks, it is accompanied by constant aggressive statements against Cuba, threat of military aggression, and the imposition of additional coercive measures. Yeah, so basically he's saying that um, America is being passive aggressive. They talks with the American officials are being is in a state of passive aggressiveness, because you know in the front end they're being respectful, and but and closed, after that they are showing aggression and making statements of of military operation, possible military operation. So that's sound to me like the U.S. officials who is spearheading this delegation with Cuba are being passive aggressive in a way, and it may be a way just to to intimidate them and know that America is a superpower in this region, and we can pretty much do whatever we like. Basically that's what I'm getting from it. Why the passive aggressiveness is being pushed. And basically America wants what America wants, and it's hard to for a small country like Cuba to hold any resistance to a certain extent. The only thing might save Cuba right now is if the administration change, and in the next 2.5 years or so, and and if the administration change in the next 2.5 years, and if the Democrats go in power, and they take their foot off the gas as it relates to how Cuba, as it relates to the Cuban situation, because mind you, both administration, Democrat and Republican over the years, put pressure on Cuba. These sanctions were in for years, for decades. However, sometimes the Democrats are not so hardline with Cuba. They, the sanctions are on, but they don't really pay them any attention. But on the contrary, this administration, the pressure is on, but at the same time, they're paying attention to make sure that the pressure is on and the sanctions are biting. And the recent oil embargo is just an example of that, to show that the United States, this current administration in the United States, is applying pressure to Cuba and also ensuring that the pressure is working. And they told us, Trump told us before he got into office, that that's what his goal was. And I understand the United States position. They just want communism out of our backyard. They just want communism out of the Western Hemisphere, because this is our hemisphere. This is United States territory. We don't want China here. We don't want the Russians here. We don't want the Iranians here. And we don't want the North Koreans here. And those are the type of states Cuba aligned with, based on the Cuban government position, and based on how the Cuban government is formed and how Cuba is run. So that's what it is today for Cuba, guys. And hopefully we shall see what happens on July 7th, as Cuba, complains to the United Nations and about this oil embargo, because now the oil embargo is biting like crazy. It's been since January or February we took out Maduro. And ever since then, Cuba haven't gotten any oil from Venezuela. Ever since in January or February. So all their reserves are done. All their reserves depleted. I think they're just running on fumes right now. And because they're running on fumes, the country economy is crippling, big time crippling. So um, it is sad, and you know, the only thing might save them is, as I said, the government of Cuba just completely give up and submit to America's demand and just change the economy overnight to a more, or not even overnight, but progressively show serious measures and show serious indication that they want to change how they operate the economy and change it into a free market society and democracy. So that's ultimately what the United States government wants. Anyways, let's pivot to another story here in our hemisphere and Venezuela. So Venezuela is the United States just just send around 900 military personnel, right, to Venezuela to help with this search and rescue effort um, because of that terrible, 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 terrible earthquake that hit Venezuela a week ago or so. So America deploy, because Venezuela, as I said before in other podcasts, Venezuela is our newfound friend, and it's only right we try to help them out because we're getting all their oil coming here. We selling their oil, selling Venezuela oil on their behalf, and we're collecting their money and stored it in our banks here in the United States, and we sending it to them as we feel to Venezuelan people. Yeah, so 900 plus troops are inside of Venezuela, and another 800 Caribbean hubs, another country, Puerto Rico, Caraco, and so on and so forth. So pretty much, America wanted to show leadership and take charge of the Caribbean and the wider Latin America. We want to spearhead and show that we are still the bosses around here. We are still the boss around here, and we take leadership and command. Basically, that's what the administration is aiming for the South American countries to not say yield to the United States, but the United States want to size them up again and put them back in a way how it was back in the past. And these recent chains of events, the taking out of Maduro and Iran situation, because um, the communist states in the world, like Cuba and not Cuba, the top communist states in the world, like Russia and China, they have major ties in South America. Like, I was in Peru. There's a bunch of BYD cars in Peru. Like, a bunch of Chinese-made EV in Peru, and and the wider South America. There's a bunch of them down there. That's so, and the Chinese government is helping Peru build, or they built, or they have their hands in a major port in Peru. So that goes to show that America understands that, and America is trying to like pave the way for better relations, or not even better relations, maybe forced relations with the South American countries. So uh, Venezuela is a newfound friend, and they got hit by the earthquake, and we out there try to um, help them out. Let me read something for you guys. So General Francis Donovan, the commander of the U.S. Southern Command, said U.S. forces participated in search and rescue operation help get the airport up and running and mobilize air and naval assets to allow for arrival of humanitarian relief after the devastating earthquake. So the U.S. pretty much is running the airport, getting everything up and running, clearing debris, and it's only right because we're getting the oil money from them. The U.S. military deployed at least 4 or 5 MQ-9 repair drones over Venezuela. What? MQ-9 Reaper drones over Venezuela to bolster the intelligence picture for Venezuelan authorities. So here we go again. We are the eyes in the skies to see how the extent of the damage over the country. Go on saying only one survivor, a 3-year-old child, has been rescued so far during the 6 day of rescue efforts. Wow, on a 3-year-old child with chances of survival narrowing by the hour. U.S. Marines were the first U.S. personnel on the ground helping rescuers dig through rubble and find survivors. And the U.S. military helped fly in civilian rescue teams, including rescue teams from Fairfax, Virginia, who publishes video of a rescue of a mother and a 9-month-old baby. Oh, that's sad. So this earthquake, guys, was crazy. This earthquake was really crazy, and I think it's one of the biggest earthquake they have since 125 years. It's the biggest in 125 years in terms of the devastating power it has, the earthquake has. So it's crazy. The extraordinary context, just in 6 months ago, the U.S. military carried out a rapid carry out a rapid to grab Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro, January 3rd. Oh, so it was in January. I forgot the date it was. Not that long ago, and just think about it, how the relationship has transformed, the U.S. general said. So, you're right, he's right. So, in January, we grabbed this dude, and before that, it was claimed that the United States was an enemy of Venezuela, but now the people are saying it's different. The people are echoing a different sentiment now, because now who's there helping? The United States is there helping. If this happened when Maduro was in power, or if Maduro was still in power and this earthquake hit, it would be a different situation. You probably wouldn't have as much, Americans down there. Probably China and Russia would be spearheading the rescue and rescue operation. And how far are they? China is halfway around the world from Venezuela, and Russia is probably same or more in distance. So we are right here. We just go down there and help them out. We have people right in Puerto Rico from there, and they just could go down whatever and whenever time. So that's what's going on, guys. 2 stories right here in our backyard, in our hemisphere, that's hitting the streets. The United States still maintain control over the Western Hemisphere, and they want to, make it be known that this is our territory. We run things around here in the Caribbean and Latin America, South America on a whole, and you know we're forcing Cuba to bend the knee, and it's only a time before the Cuban government really bend the knee and submit to the United States will, in a way, which is, if you look at it that way, is highly messed up and highly crazy for us to speak of the initiative in such ways. But basically, we're not sugarcoating anything. That's how we see it. That's how it is going, and that's how we think the United States want, want them to understand that we are the superpower, and we say change your economy, change your government structure to democracy, and change your economy to free market. And if you don't, we're gonna block you and starve you to death. And it's only a matter of time before there's gonna be like an uprise from the people, and the people will try to really take over the government themselves and change the government into more so a democratic state in a way. So that's it, guys. Cuba has fallen to us, and not Cuba, Venezuela have fallen to us so far, and Cuba is on its way. So this is Jermaine Views. I'm giving all these stories. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'm happy to talk with you guys today, just to shed some information and share my views on some of these pointers. You know, thank you for listening in, and we shall see you in next video. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe. I'm out. I'll see you guys another time.